In 1983, NBC Entertainment president Brandon Tartikoff kept a poster on his office wall. It wasn't for one of his hits, not The Cosby Show, not Miami Vice, not Cheers. It was for Manimal, a show about a man who transforms into animals to fight crime. A show that lasted exactly 8 episodes. He kept it there for years as a reminder of what happens when ambition meets reality. The 1980s produced a graveyard of ambitious fantasy and sci-fi television. Shows with elaborate premises, expensive effects, bold creative visions, and networks that killed them within weeks or months. At least a dozen high-concept genre shows debuted and died in a single season between 1980 and 1989. And here's the thing. Most of them weren't canceled because they were bad. They were destroyed by suicidal scheduling, impossible budgets, and network executives who didn't understand what they'd greenlit in the first place. Today, we're counting down 10 of the most fascinating failures of 80s genre television. The shows that tried to bring fantasy, horror, and science fiction to network TV and got murdered for their trouble. If you grew up in this era, you might remember catching one of these late at night, wondering what happened to it. If you didn't, you're about to discover some truly wild television history. Before we dive in, if you enjoy this kind of deep dive into forgotten pop culture, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. Now, let's travel back to a decade when networks kept greenlighting shows they had no idea how to support. Number 10. The Phoenix.
With a gift for mankind, the Phoenix.
We're starting with a show that had everything going for it, until it didn't. The Phoenix premiered as a TV movie in April of 1981 and drew a massive 30 share. That's the kind of number that makes network executives start seeing dollar signs. The premise was genuinely ambitious. An ancient astronaut named Bennu of the Golden Light awakens from a sarcophagus in Peru. He searches for his companion while being pursued by government agents. It was Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods meets The Fugitive. ABC was thrilled. They ordered a series. The pilot script was written in just 6.5 days. They cast Judson Scott in the lead and Richard Lynch as the government antagonist. They even had E.G. Marshall as a sympathetic scientist. The future looked bright. Then, ABC made 2 decisions that killed the show before it could breathe. First, they scheduled it as a mid-season replacement on Friday nights at 9 p.m., directly against Dallas, the #1 show on television, and The Dukes of Hazzard. Because apparently, someone at ABC had never heard of competitive scheduling. Second, they gutted the creative vision. The show's creators had written a detailed series Bible and scripts. ABC discarded them, brought in different writers, transformed what was meant to be a mythological epic into yet another show resembling The Fugitive. The network reportedly nearly had a stroke during the pilot's beach scene, showing Bennu's innocent nudity. The Phoenix lasted 5 episodes. Just 5. A show that drew a 30 share as a movie couldn't survive the network's own interference. There's a small footnote to this story that I love. The Phoenix amulet worn by the main character was designed by the creator's teenage son, Tim Lawrence. He went on to become a Hollywood concept artist with roughly 400 credits, including Batman, Jurassic Park, multiple Marvel films. So at least something from this disaster had a happy ending. Number 9. Otherworld.
I know what this is. It's a time warp back to the 50s.
Picture this. A family on vacation in Egypt accidentally falls through a portal into a parallel dimension. They have to survive in a totalitarian society while searching for a way home. It's basically Sliders before Sliders existed. And the villain hunting them? Jonathan Banks. Yes, that Jonathan Banks. Decades before, he became Mike Ehrmantraut on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Otherworld premiered in January of 1985 as a mid-season replacement. The circumstances of its arrival were already strange. It replaced Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer after the show's star, Stacy Keach, was sentenced to 9 months in a London prison for cocaine smuggling. So Otherworld got its shot at primetime entirely because of someone else's legal troubles. The show had real ambition. Creator Roderick Taylor envisioned a darker, more mature series. He compared the format to Star Trek. They could go from planet to planet. This show could go from province to province. Anything Star Trek could do, Otherworld could do. CBS disagreed. The network rejected 12 of Taylor's story ideas and pushed for a safer, more family-friendly tone. Taylor had pitched episodes about the family encountering sinister replicants. All turned down. He wanted them to confront their worst fears and fight for their lives. CBS wanted something the whole family could watch at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. The show filmed in Yuma, Arizona for the Parallel Worlds desert landscapes. The city in the opening credits was actually a photographic negative of New York City. A clever and cheap visual trick. The ratings told the story. The household ratings declined steadily. 14.4, 11.9, 10.8, 9.1. By the end of its 8-episode run, Otherworld averaged a 10.4 rating and ranked 70th out of 75 programs on television. Here's a fun piece of trivia. The 2-hour pilot was split into 2 episodes. The first half became episode 1, and the second became episode 5. This explains why the youngest son is played by different actors in different episodes. Otherworld has never received an official DVD or Blu-ray release. If you want to see Jonathan Banks as a totalitarian commander 2 decades before Breaking Bad, you'll have to find it on YouTube, where HD episodes have been uploaded by dedicated fans. Number 8. Automan.
I think I can get us down, but beyond that... Down, Otto, down!
Tron came out in 1982 and blew everyone's minds with its computer-generated visuals. Naturally, television wanted a piece of that action. Enter Automan, a show about a computer programmer who creates a holographic being to help fight crime. Here's the problem. Automan had Tron's aesthetic without any actual computers. Despite looking like a show full of cutting-edge digital effects, no actual computer graphics were used. Everything was achieved through traditional animation overlays, chroma key effects, and practical techniques. The Automan costume used retroreflective sheeting. That's fabric made of tiny reflective balls with highly polished plates for a holographic look. The same technique had been used for Kryptonian costumes in Superman. The show starred Desi Arnaz Jr. Yes, the son of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. He played the computer programmer. Broadway performer Chuck Wagner played the glowing holographic hero. The autocar was built on a real Lamborghini Countach with reflective blue lines. The show's best recurring gag involved that car. It could make instantaneous 90-degree turns that slammed the human passengers against the windows. It was actually pretty funny. Automan was created by Glenn A. Larson. And here's where things get interesting. Larson also created another show that premiered the same season, Manimal, which we'll get to later. Both shows were canceled. That means Glenn A. Larson had 2 high-concept series fail on 2 different networks in the same 1983 to 84 season. That takes a special kind of ambition. Automan earned a Nielsen rating of 13.6 for the season, placing it very low in the rankings. ABC was having a catastrophic year and canceled almost its entire fall roster. 13 episodes were produced, but only 12 aired. The show eventually got its due in 2015 when Shout Factory released a DVD that included a 42-minute documentary called Calling Automan with interviews from the original cast. One television retrospective called it funnier and smarter than Larson's other 1983 superhero series, which brings us to our next entry. Number 7. Something is out there.
What?
What?
Why on earth would 2 people do something like that with their bodies?
What?
that?
This show teaches us an important lesson about what happens when a network falls in love with a miniseries, but can't afford to make it as a weekly show. Something Is Out There debuted as a 4-hour, 2-part miniseries in May of 1988. It starred Joe Cortese as a detective and Miriam Diabo, fresh from playing the Bond girl in The Living Daylights, as an alien medical officer. The miniseries had creature effects by Rick Baker and visual effects by John Dykstra, an Oscar winner for Star Wars. It was a big budget affair. $7.5 million for those 4 hours. The ratings were strong. NBC President Brandon Tartikoff greenlit a weekly series 1 week later, ordering 13 episodes. There was just one small problem: the budget. The miniseries cost $7.5 million, with Rick Baker and John Dykstra. The weekly series got approximately $1 million per episode. Without Baker, without Dykstra. That's an 87% budget cut. The show's producer summed it up in a Starlog interview. Things definitely change fast when a mini-series becomes a weekly series. It's great when you've got 4 hours, $7.5 million, and the talents of Rick Baker and John Dykstra. But what happens when you're suddenly cut to $1 million per episode budget? What happens is the show doesn't work anymore. The weekly series was first scheduled against Dallas, then moved against Beauty and the Beast. 8 weekly episodes were produced, but only 6 aired in the original run. The remaining 2 eventually appeared on the Sci-Fi Channel years later. Number 6. Wizards and Warriors.
Take out our swords, start hacking away. With any luck at all, we can take out about 50 of those punks. You ready?
This show was Dungeons & Dragons meets Monty Python. And honestly, it should have worked. Wizards and Warriors premiered in February of 1983 as a mid-season replacement. It was set in a sword and sorcery world with a comedic twist. Jeff Conaway from Grease and Taxi starred as Prince Eric Greystone, battling the villainous Prince Dirk Blackpool. The show filmed at Walt Disney's Golden Oak Ranch in California, and even reused battle footage from the 1981 film Excalibur as a cost-saving measure. The cast was legitimately talented. Julia Duffy played Princess Ariel and later parlayed her comic work here into her famous role as Stephanie on Newhart. Duncan Regger made for a memorable villain. Bill Bixby directed 3 of the 8 episodes. Here's the remarkable thing about this show. Despite lasting only 8 episodes, it won an Emmy. Costume designer Theodora Van Runkel won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Costumes at the 35th Primetime Emmys in September of 1983. That's an incredible achievement for a mid-season replacement that most people never saw. The show's tone was considered too eccentric for mainstream audiences in 1983. A syndicated columnist praised it as witty, but viewers didn't materialize. Fantasy was still a niche genre on television. The same year CBS aired the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, but live-action fantasy for adults hadn't found its audience yet. One retrospective argued that Wizards and Warriors really could have been an earlier version of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. It was just a decade too early. A dedicated fan site launched in December of 2000 and remained active through at least 2017. Warner Archive released the complete series on DVD in July of 2014, and if you look it up on IMDb, you'll find it has a respectable 7.5 rating from people who remember it fondly. Number 5. Misfits of Science.
Whatever he's here for has something to do with that totem in his hand, but we can get him to communicate.
Here's a show that assembled a team of superheroes years before superheroes took over television. Misfits of Science was essentially a proto-X-Men. The concept originated with NBC Entertainment president Brandon Tartikoff himself. The premise assembled a team of human anomalies at a fictional research institute, a scientist who can shrink to 6 inches, an electrically powered rock musician, and a telekinetic teenager. The cast included some names you'll definitely recognize. Kevin Peter Hall, who later played the Predator in the Predator films, played the shrinking scientist, and a very young Courtney Cox played the telekinetic teenager Gloria Dinallo. This was one of her earliest roles, years before she became a household name on Friends. The show has an interesting connection to later superhero television. One episode was written by Tim Kring, who later created Heroes, a thematically near-identical show about people with superpowers. Misfits of Science was basically Heroes 15 years too early. Unfortunately, NBC scheduled it on Thursday nights against The Cosby Show and Family Ties, the number 1 and number 2 shows on all of television. The result was predictable. Misfits of Science tied for the worst ratings of all 106 shows in the 1985 to 86 season. 16 episodes were produced, 15 aired. The show carries a tragic footnote. Star Dean Paul Martin, the son of Dean Martin, died in a 1987 plane crash. Kevin Peter Hall died in 1991 from AIDS-related pneumonia. The show's brief run was followed by real-world loss. Number 4. Werewolf. Now we're getting into the shows with truly wild behind-the-scenes stories. Werewolf was one of Fox Broadcasting's very first original series. Creator Frank Lupo reportedly conceived the idea in the shower. The show featured werewolf creatures designed by Rick Baker, who had won an Oscar for An American Werewolf in London. Baker created a hunchbacked ursine creature with gorilla-like arms and handmade imported fur. It looked incredible. The show premiered with a 2-hour pilot in July of 1987 and ran for 29 episodes, making it the longest-running series on this list. It starred John J. York as a cursed college student trying to break his curse by killing the werewolf who bit him. Chuck Connors played the evil original werewolf in what became his final television role, and that's where things got interesting. After production began, Chuck Connors demanded to renegotiate his contract for more money. According to the show's script editor, this led to Connors being effectively written out. His last human form appearance was episode 9. After that, subsequent appearances used only werewolf form footage or a body double. When the creators decided to kill off Connors' character, they wrote a 3-part death arc. 2 days before shooting, they learned Connors would not participate. The script was collapsed into a single episode. All new dialogue for the character was cut. The death scene used a body double in disfiguring makeup after the hero scarred him with acid and electrocuted him. That's one of the most dramatic behind-the-scenes conflicts in 80s television history, and most people have never heard about it. The show's cancellation came from budget costs. The expensive creature effects were unsustainable. The 30-minute episode format was also widely criticized as too short to develop stories properly. Werewolf has the strongest cult following of any show on this list. A Shout Factory DVD release was planned in 2009, but had to be canceled because 2 musical artists refused to license their songs, and the music was mixed with the dialogue. It couldn't be replaced without destroying the episodes. Bloody Disgusting called it one of horror television's greatest hidden gems. And if you're in France, you can actually buy a complete series DVD box set released in 2020. Number 3. Once a Hero.
You're insane, Destructo. A revolting, pathetic madman.
A madman?
This show was killed by Star Trek. Literally. Once a Hero had a daringly meta premise. A comic book superhero named Captain Justice, losing readers in his fictional world, literally crosses into reality to prove heroes still matter. It was postmodern superhero commentary, arriving at the same time as The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. The show premiered September 19th, 1987 on ABC. Only 3 of the 7 produced episodes aired before cancellation on October 3rd. That's 2 weeks. What happened? A cascading series of disasters. First, the original pilot cast a different actor as Captain Justice, a small, skinny guy, played against type as a deliberate comedic choice. When producers lost confidence, they recast the role. But the original pilot had already been screened for key advertising executives. That generated devastating word of mouth before the show even aired. Second, and this is the killer, the premiere date of September 19th, 1987, collided with the debut of Star Trek, the next generation in first-run syndication. Many ABC affiliates preempted their own network's show to air Star Trek instead. One station bluntly told the New York Times, "Once a hero is gone." The show was supposed to be their network's programming, and their affiliates dumped it for a syndicated show. That's how powerful Star Trek was in 1987. There's another piece of trivia here. The show was originally intended as a Human Torch adaptation. Captain Justice and his sidekick were meant to be Marvel's Human Torch and Toro until copyright issues forced generic replacements. Marvel did publish a 2-issue Captain Justice comic spin-off in March of 1988, which was also canceled after 2 issues. One of the unaired episodes featured Adam West playing himself, an actor typecast from playing Captain Justice on TV. It was a direct mirror of West's own post-Batman struggles. Another unaired episode featured Fran Drescher, but almost nobody saw any of it. Number 2. Shadow Chasers. This show earned a distinction that no one wants. It was the lowest rated program in all of American television. Shadow Chasers was ABC's transparent attempt to replicate Ghostbusters on television. The 1984 film had been a massive hit, so naturally the network wanted a buddy paranormal comedy. They paired a skeptical British anthropologist with a flamboyant tabloid reporter investigating the supernatural. The show was created by Brian Grazer, who later produced A Beautiful Mind and Apollo 13, and Kenneth Johnson, who created The Incredible Hulk, V, and The Bionic Woman. These weren't amateurs. Johnson directed the pilot himself. ABC produced humorous promotional commercials starring Ricardo Montalban and Ron Howard. They were heavily aired during the network's North and South miniseries. They put real marketing muscle behind this show. Then they scheduled it on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. against The Cosby Show and Family Ties, the number 1 and number 2 shows on television, and Magnum P.I. on CBS. The result? Shadow Chasers earned an average 5.8 rating with a 9 share. According to AC Nielsen data cited in multiple newspapers, it was the lowest rated of all 106 programs during the 1985 to 86 season, dead last. 14 episodes were produced. Only 10 aired on ABC. The remaining 4 were shown on the Armed Forces Network overseas. Apparently, the military was less picky about ratings. One television retrospective called it a transparent effort to replicate Ghostbusters, but without any of the charm or wit that made the film work. Another called it easily the least successful series ever thought up by major TV creator Kenneth Johnson. The complete series is now available on the Internet Archive if you want to see what dead last looks like. Number 1. Manimal. And here we are, the granddaddy of 80s genre failures. The show so legendarily bad that the network president kept its poster on his wall for years as a reminder of his own hubris. Manimal premiered September 30th, 1983, with a 90-minute pilot on NBC. The premise? Dr. Jonathan Chase, a wealthy professor, can transform into any animal to fight crime. In practice, he mostly transformed into a black panther and a hawk because those were the only transformation sequences they could afford. Those transformation sequences were designed by Stan Winston, the Academy Award-winning effects artist who would later create the creatures for Terminator, Aliens, and Jurassic Park. Winston used bladder effects and practical prosthetics adapted from horror film techniques. The effects were genuinely impressive for television. The music was scored by Alan Silvestri, years before his iconic Back to the Future and Avengers scores. Simon McCorkindale starred as the lead, with Melody Anderson from Flash Gordon as the female lead. So you had Stan Winston effects, Alan Silvestri music, and a cast from actual theatrical films. This should have worked. NBC scheduled it on Fridays at 9 p.m. against Dallas, during the peak of the Who Shot JR phenomenon. The show lasted 8 episodes. NBC's entire 1983 fall lineup was catastrophic. Not a single new show survived to a second season. It was sometimes called NBC's no-hitter year. NBC Entertainment president Brandon Tartikoff championed the show, which is why it's so fitting that he kept that poster on his wall afterward. In a later interview, he acknowledged that Manimal was part of a string of 9 consecutive flops. But the real legacy of Manimal is how it became a punchline. On November 8, 1983, David Letterman devoted a nearly 9-minute late-night segment to Manimal Show at the Crossroads after NBC announced a hiatus. A psychic was brought on to predict the show's future. The verdict? Not on another network, not in syndication, not on home cassettes. It's a ghost. It's history. It's vapor. Tartikoff himself hosted Saturday Night Live on October 8, 1983, the season 9 premiere. He appeared in a comedy bit sticking Manimal flyers on car windshields in New York City. The show was already a joke while it was still technically on the air. TV Guide later ranked Manimal number 15 on its list of the 50 worst TV shows of all time. British Trade, Weekly Broadcast's readers voted it the number 5 worst US TV export. And yet, the show has fans. A Will Ferrell and Adam McKay produced film adaptation was announced by Sony Pictures Animation in 2012, with Key and Peele writers hired for the script. Creator Glenn A. Larson's death in 2014 appears to have stalled the project. But the fact that it was ever announced tells you something about Manimal's weird cultural staying power. Shout Factory released the complete series on DVD in November 2015. All 8 episodes are available on YouTube. The transformation sequences are genuinely fun to watch, even if the show around them doesn't quite work. Conclusion. So what do these failures tell us about 1980s network television? The pattern is unmistakable. Scheduling was the single greatest killer. Show after show was placed against Dallas, The Cosby Show, or 60 Minutes with predictable results. Networks greenlit expensive high-concept premises, then seemed surprised when they cost money to produce and needed time to find audiences. Glenn A. Larson had 2 shows canceled on 2 different networks in the same season. Frank Lupo created both Werewolf and Something Is Out There, both canceled within a year. Brandon Tartikoff both championed and killed multiple shows on this list. Rick Baker provided creature effects for 2 shows that couldn't afford to keep using him. But here's the thing, these shows weren't failures of imagination. They were failures of infrastructure. The 1980s network television ecosystem simply couldn't support the ambitious genre storytelling that audiences would later devour on cable and streaming. Think about it. Wizards and Warriors preceded Hercules and Xena. Misfits of Science preceded Heroes. Max Headroom preceded Black Mirror. Werewolf preceded Buffy. Every one of these shows anticipated something that would later succeed. They were just born in the wrong decade, on the wrong networks, scheduled against the wrong competition. If you remember watching any of these shows late at night, wondering what happened to them, now you know. They were sacrificed on the altar of Thursday night dominance and Friday night Dallas. If you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten television history, make sure to subscribe and check out our other videos on 80s pop culture. Drop a comment letting us know which of these shows you actually remember, or which one you're most curious to track down now. Until next time, remember, in the 1980s, the line between ambitious and canceled was about 15 minutes.